Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have a terrific show today with two wonderful poets, Charles Harper Webb and Doren Robbins. Charles Harper Webb's latest collection of poems, Sideband World, was published by the University of Pittsburgh Press in 2018. 1 million MFAs are not enough, a collection of Webb's essays on contemporary American poetry, was published in 2016 by Red Hand Press, which will publish his novel, Ursula Lake, in 2022. Recipient of grants from the Whiting and Guggenheim Foundations, Webb teaches creative writing at California State University, Long Beach. Here's a marvelous poet, Charles Harper Webb.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, you mentioned Cal State Long Beach, and I'll tell everybody who's watching that the pyramid behind me is not at Giza, it's at Cal State Long Beach. This is just a background that I teach behind or in front of. First poem I'd like to do is the title poem from my latest book, Sideband World. To follow it most easily, just imagine that somebody has gotten out of a rental car on the island of Hawaii. The person's back is sore, they've been driving a while, and they just do a side bend, and the world changes. Sideband world. When I lean to my right, left arm stretched over my head to help relax back muscles knotted up from hefting heavy luggage yesterday, the purple dawn-brushed ocean tilts to my right too. All scorpion fish and whales and giant squid tilt right, having to swim now on an angle to parallel the surface of the sea that swells and settles on an angle that increases the farther to my right I go. All cars in the condo parking lot incline. The maps, rental contracts, half-eaten burgers boxed and forgotten in vacationers' trunks, shift, slide, fall to the right side. All waves tilt as they roar toward shore like humpbacked monsters hissing angry spume that leans, as does the lava Kilauea extruded last night, and every tree and shrub now dressing up in day-glow green. Doves in flight, cuck, like scouts that shout a warning, palm to slanted palm. Bird-brained egotists, they think the cosmos orbits around them. Speaking of which, the sky tilts, and the clouds tinted orange and pink, and the air, which gleams pale blue. The faded sliver of a moon tilts, insisting, I'm still here, and way up high, the planets spinning through space feel themselves, if they can feel, shifting right until I straighten and the universe does too. So I like that one as a kind of introduction to my poetry, because a lot of the things I like to do in poetry is look at things from a slightly different angle. As Emily Dickinson said, tell the truth, but tell it slant. Some of you probably remember the journal called Weekly World News. It used to be with National Enquirer and the like, right where you check out in the supermarket. It's since, alas, gone out of business, I guess. But it used to be, for my money, the greatest surrealist journal in the country. And I used to like to look at the headlines on it. One of the characters that they featured again and again was the world's fattest man. He had all kinds of adventures. And one day, as I was checking out, I saw the headline, World's Fattest Man is Missing. And I just couldn't resist it, so I had to write something from the voice of the world's fattest man. I had no idea what was going to happen when I wrote it, which is the best way for me to write poems. I just started writing, and it came out like this. World's fattest man is missing. When I weighed 200 pounds, no one could miss me. Sunny Day Play School trucked in a special desk and let me use the teacher's pot. Did you see that? people would say. At 400, I started fading. When the boys chose sides, they didn't look at me. When I asked Tina to the prom, she turned as if I weren't there. At half a ton, I couldn't squeeze out of my house to be seen. I dodged mirrors like a vampire, so they stopped reflecting me. Now people stare at my photo, bloated toad with tiny tadpole feet, my pea head grinning like the world's biggest 3,010-pound joke. In person, I'm like Earth's curvature, my scale too vast to see. People mistake me for some water-sculpted mountain. Parts keep avalanching down. Once the flesh quits quivering, I'm very still. Matter ceases to exist when movement stops. That is my goal as I sit, absorbing stillness. Or is it absorbing me? Houseflies doze on my forehead. Spiders nest in every crack. Soon, my weight will make me fall into myself. My gravity so strong, not even light escapes. So he turns into a black hole. Believe me, I didn't see that coming when I wrote it. I didn't know what I was going to write. I guess I get a lot of ideas for poems from commerce, things that strike me as funny, because we certainly have a lot of strange things in the United States that are offered for sale. And a few years back, there used to be ads all the time on TV for a kind of knife that was called Jinsu, Ginsu. Maybe some of you remember it. I think it was supposed to have a Japanese quality, like a samurai or something. But it was one of these knives that would do anything and never, it would cut through anything and could never go dull. And I wrote this poem called Jinsu. Never need sharpening knife that zipped through auto hoses, tree limbs, carpet, metal, bone, that came in sets of 12, plus grater, chopper, apple corer, egg slicer, fruit and potato peeler, juicer, blender, spiraler, recipe book, and lifetime guarantee, even if the damage was my fault. Wonder of the 80s, price so low I feared a scam. Jinsu, burnished samurai blades, Zen masters who practiced swordplay, then snoozed as if war were a pillow fight. The little boy, fat man fallout had blown away, leaving the Japanese our masters of cheap technology. I loved knowing the knives were there, Boy Scouts of cutlery, always prepared. Those were American days. Russia collapsed in a red heap, our freeways reaching out, stocks climbing, enemies misguided, small and impotent. We waxed our cars, surfed Malibu, and drove our kids to Flint Ridge Prep on the way to Harvard Law. Our airplanes flew super glued into the sky and landed gently as monarch butterflies. We owned the air, godlike as New York's Twin Towers. All disease was curable, or soon would be. No knot was too Gordian to slice and dice or fricassee. Sharp as Excalibur, clean lined and gleaming, we were unstoppable, indestructible, lifetime guaranteed. Times have changed a little bit, I would say. Okay, I'm going to change books here. One of the creatures in the world that I have a limited tolerance for is spiders. They've always just given me the willies, but they're also astounding. They're amazing creatures. And so I sort of fought through my inner revulsion, and I wrote this poem called Spiders. They drift through darkness, 8-fingered hands grasping for your eyes. In daylight, they occur like accidents, suddenly there. They are fear's footprint on the shower floor, its runes stamped on the wall, small hopping nightmares, scuttling aliens. They charge at you with scrabbly legs, jaws dripping pain. Masters of treachery, they leap from hiding, paralyze their prey, then suck it dry. Creeping out from dusty corners, cracks in walls, they are your landlords when the lights die. Fuzzy succubi, they sleep with you, leave itchy kisses where they've been. Walking to the bathroom, 2 a.m., your feet tickle. Don't hit the light switch. Don't look down. It's not enough to spray them with black flag. They must be drowned in it. It's not enough to crush one gently, grind it underfoot until it disappears. Yet they are beautiful, furry as buffalo, long-limbed as ballerinas. Tiny illusionists, they rise and fall on invisible sky wires. Millions of years after crawling from the sea, they throw out nets to harvest the breeze. They weave blankets for the ground's feet, shawls for the quivering shoulders of the trees. Their webs, transparent fielder's gloves, pluck flies out of midair. In this world they helped create, I am the newcomer, threatening get out of town by dawn. Yet elfin bodyguards, they clear a path for me through the constant crush of bugs. They cordon off a spot, my private tuffet, and they run away when I sit down. A lot of times when I write poems, I start with an idea that I think is funny or peculiar or something like that, and then I let it go to see where it will end. That's certainly what I did with The World's Fattest Man, and it's also what I did with this next poem. I'm sure some of you know, at least, the Bible is full of amazing stories, and sometimes I go through it to get ideas for poems. And one day I was doing that, and it occurred to me that there were a lot of strange names that, at least strange to English-speaking ears, that only happened once. And I thought, well, you know, at least they got mentioned once in the Bible. That's not too bad. So this title came to my mind, and I wrote the poem off of the title. And the title was Biblical Also Rans. And it plays on some names from the Hebrew Bible, and then it goes where it goes. Biblical Also Rans. Hanok, Palu, Hezron, Carmi, Jemuel, Ohad, Zohar, Shuni. One Genesis mentions all you got. Zephion, Muppum, Arodi, lost in a list even the most devout skip over, like small towns on the road to LA. How tall were you, Shillam? What was your favorite color, Ard? Did you love your wife, Iob? Not even her name survives. Adam, Eve, Abel, Cain, these are the stars crowds surge to see. Each hour, thousands of Josephs, Jacobs, Benjamins are born. How many Oholibamas? How many Mizas draw first breath today? Gatam, Kanaz, Ruel, sidemen in the band, waiters who bring the Perignon and disappear. Yet they loved dawn's garnet light as much as Moses did. They drank wine with as much delight. I thought my life would line me up with Samuel, Isaac, Joshua. Instead, I stand with Bazamoth, Hagla, Amehud, Theirs are the names I honor. Theirs the deaths I feel. Their children's tears loud as any on the corpse of Abraham. Their smiles as mist, the earth as desolate without them. Pebbles on a hill, crumbs carried off by ants. Jeush, Dishan, Nahath, Shammah. Another one, I had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, it turned into a kind of incantation at the end. I didn't know that was going to happen at all. So that's when I like my poems the best, when they surprise me. Oh, let's see. Here is another one. I haven't read this one for a while. I used to read it all the time, so I thought I'd do it today. I got to check my time too. Harry, make sure and just tell me to when it needs to happen. This is called Big. Another one about, I guess, about commerce and things we own in the United States. Big. I know when I buy it that it's big. And when the guy who wheels it out, not on a dolly, but a flatbed as long as my truck, when that guy with his Fu Manchu and lifter's belt won't try to lift it, even with my help, I know it's really big. And when the guy he calls clumps up, and as he cinches on his belt, I shove and the thing won't budge, I know it's too big. Not until, though, we hoist one edge onto my tailgate, and for an instant, half its weight presses my knee so hard I feel a bruise rising, straight-edged as the box. Not until then do I grasp half how big it is. My fantasy, families and friends watching theater-style movies in my den, popcorn and cappuccino courtesy of me, collapses like my dream of surfing Malibu. Somehow I thrashed to where the surfers bobbed, relaxed as gulls on the broad-shouldered swells. But my wave didn't break into a 2-foot royal of chop the way Galveston waves do, as if the sea has unrolled a frothy white rug. It kept rising, a titanic shoulder shrug, and I knew it was too much wave, too much mass, too much speed, too much water. It was too much wrestler for me, too much marlin, too large an army with too many missiles raining down. It was too much fastball, too much free fall. Oh, page is stuck. Too many tacklers, too few blockers, too many rules of etiquette, far too many lawyers slithering into town. It was too much thermodynamics and wind chill, too much calculus, too much interest on a mega jumbo loan. It was despair, genital shrinkage, intestinal outrush, earthquake on top of earthquake grinding me. Oh, it was fear, fear, fear. I know as that big TV crushes down, I'll never make it do my bidding or give me back what used to be my home. All right, I'm going to change back books again. All right, here's a poem that, well, I think the poem will probably speak for itself, but I'll just say that it struck me how many times things end that we don't know are ending at the time. And this poem is called, We Rarely Mark When They've Occurred. Last home run, last pot roast cooked by mama's hand, last blood red sunrise staining a favorite trout stream, last healthy day. I rise from bed to make my love a cup of tea. Whack, a pole axe severs us forever. Even memories in their brilliant tie-dyed t-shirts, file aboard the future 747, gone. Like my last whiff of plumeria, the last day sprinklers woke me to the sough of waves, my last papaya spooned like orange candy from the green and yellow rind, one dove hollering hoo-hoo as the rest soothed kia-ka-kuia-wah, which means each day is a new bride. Like the last time my pencil slides across the paper, jabs a period and lifts, satisfied. Okay, I think I'm going to do one more. It's only 100 pages, so I should be able to get through it in time. This is a poem about how one life is not enough. Like our ability as humans to empathize with others means we can put on all kinds of different hats. And that's what I do when I read a book or read a poem I like or hear some music or something like that. I jump from person to person. And this starts with me as a Cajun because I like the song Jambalaya and I heard it. And so it moves from me as different things. It's called Down the Bayou. One verse into Jambalaya, and I'm poling my pirogue down the bayou under beards of Spanish moss. I'm wrestling a bull gator for its scaly steaks. I'm telling Yvonne I don't much like Big Macs, me, while crunching crawfish, which creeped me out before. I'm rocking at the Fay-Do-Do, accordions pumping and wheezing as couples two-step on the houseboat floor. Hey, The Sopranos are on TV. 5 minutes in, I'm calling guys Frankie the Frog and Lenny Lasagna, swigging vino, yelling, forget about it, laughing so hard, silly fusillades the room. I'm placing family over everything, wondering who to whack when my stereo, a wedding present from the Don, blares, She Loves You. Suddenly, I'm slurping lobscouse with the lads, tromping through cold Liverpool rain, winking at birds, all of whom I've shagged and now call love. Before I'm halfway to me mum's, I've written yesterday and help. When George clomps on my foot, I bark, fuck's sake, you broke me fucking toe. The girls scream louder. The prettiest takes me home as she makes me a nice cup of tea from dark shadows beside her bed. Interview with a vampire hisses, open me. 3 pages in, a raven-haired seductress gives me her dark gift. Eternity wraps me in a satin cape, warm and black as the Tuscan night through which my red Ferrari's slicing, me bat flapping overhead, when a pink Hummer roars up, blasting 50 Cent. Right away, I'm styling down dark Bed-Stuy streets, sweaty from hoops with Mike and boxing Sugar Ray. Snug in my ankle-length snow leopard coat, I'm king of the hood, one badass motherfucker. But I take care of my peeps like my hoes take care of me. I strut into Zorba's place to get my props. But one plate of moussaka chased with ouzo, and I'm scarfing appetite in thick-cut chops. My laugh embraces every ecstasy. My words deserve a dissertation, but you can't learn life from books. You've got to seize beauty and drive death back with zest and truth and charm. So I link arms with everyone and make the whole place shake. Opa, we yell, staggering drunk, woozy from love's sacred cup. Opa, opa, hard breathing, stomping calloused feet, we hold each other up. Thank you.
That was a fabulous reading, Charles. You have such vitality and humor. Jennifer said have fun. That's certainly what we're doing. And the way you give in to whatever it is you begin with, and you just give in and to the creative, it's just such a sense of exuberance and pleasure. So thank you very much, and a superb use of language. A couple of questions. We have a few minutes here.
Oh, okay.
Doren reads, when did you write your first poem?
Well, I think the first poem I wrote was probably in first grade, but my mother pretty much wrote it. It was just some little weird thing. I started writing what I thought were poems probably in my junior year, because I discovered that girls enjoyed having poems written to them, and that was very reinforcing. And I also wrote. I also discovered that I had a facility with rhyme and vulgar humor, which I'm still good at, and I could get my friends to laugh. They would say, "Write us a poem about this subject," and I would write something just scurrilous. It was stupid, but made my friends laugh. So that's pretty much when I started, and then I got more serious at it when I was in college.
What is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
Because I think I'm really crazy about language, and I think that poetry gives you the chance to use language to the absolute tip top that you can do it with. I mean, so to me that's what I like it the most. Anything. I mean, I can push my own language as far as I'm capable. I never run out of challenges.
Do you rewrite or do you just write?
I rewrite like crazy. I do the thing that William Butler Yeats talk about. I write and revise and work my butt off so that it sounds like I didn't revise or work at all, so that it sounds like I just thought of that. But believe me, I didn't.
Now, you mentioned in your reading that you have you start with an idea sometimes, or most of the time, whatever, however you send it. Sometimes a funny idea. Is that the way you do all of your poems?
Not all of them. I'll take an idea anywhere I can get it. But I noticed that a lot of the times something that will really catch my eye is something that I think is funny or peculiar. And usually, if I start exploring it, I think comedians know this, there's usually something much more deep and intense underneath it. So in my poems, even the ones that are funny, I don't show them unless I think that there's something underneath that's also serious. So I write seriously humorous stuff when it's humorous. And it's not all humorous, but when I do a reading, I tend to kind of lean on the humor because I think humor goes over well in readings.
Well, and it's pretty rare in the poetry world too. I mean, you and Kirchi are two who come to mind in that vein. Do you?
Well, Ron and I are best buds. We edit each other's stuff all the time. We're in constant contact. So,
have you ever? I've known both of you poets for quite a few years. Have you ever changed your style, or has your style been basically the same?
Now, I did make one major change, and when I first began writing and publishing, I think that I was much more raw than I was later. At a certain point, when I was about 28 or 29, I felt like I'd kind of gone as far as I could in one direction. I used to say I was kind of like a Charles Bukowski with more surrealism and better skin, and I thought I pushed that as far as I could go. And so I made it a point to try to learn more about poetry at that point. I really put myself to school again. I was done with grad school. I'd gone through all that stuff, but I just thought, I don't really know enough. I'm not good enough at forms. There's too much for me to learn. And I want to go beyond this place because Bukowski was already there, and so I think I changed. I think my stuff got a little more, for lack of a better word, deeper or something. I don't know. That could be an illusion, but I saw myself as changing.
Just one brief thing before I introduce Doren. So is what you're saying your poetry became more formal?
Maybe, yeah. I think there was a more formal element that came into it. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Just all in all, I think maybe it was a kind of growing up or something, because when I was writing my 20s, I got a lot of stuff published as really a raw, raunchy young man, very sexual, very violent, very bad boy kind of stuff. And maybe I just outgrew it. I mean, you can only be that so long.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. It's been a real pleasure to see you and hear your wonderful writing.
Well,
And
thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Our next poet is Doren Robbins. Originally from Los Angeles, Doren Robbins is a poet, mixed media artist, and educator. After years of traveling, raising a family, working as a line cook, a sous chef, and another 10 years as a carpenter, Robbins started teaching a variety of creative writing and literature courses through an extended personal and moral interpretation of Kenneth Burke's idea of, quote, literature as equipment for living, end of quote, incorporating dreaming as found cinema and fantasy as deliberate reasoning. Since 2001, along with a variety of composition courses, he has taught literature and creative writing at Foothill College. Robbins' work has appeared in over 150 publications, including Kayak, Sulphur, Lana Turner, the American Poetry Review, Cimarron Review, 5 a.m. on the Bus, Caliban, the Iowa Review, Nimrod, Miramar, and Salt. His books have been awarded the Blue Links Poetry Award 2001 and the 2008 Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Poetry Award. Twin Extras, a poem in 3 parts from Wild Ocean Press, was nominated for the 2015 Jewish National Book Council Award in Poetry. In 2021, Spoyton, however you pronounce that, Spoyton Duyville Press published Sympathetic Manifesto, Selected Poems, 1975 to 2015. Pardon me for the bad pronunciation. Maybe you can correct that for me, Doren. Here's a magnificent poet, Doren Robbins.
Thank you, Harry, for that intro. And I really delighted in Charles' reading of his poems. And it's true, there is something much deeper beneath that humor, a really profound sense of irony about American culture. It's Spoyton Duyville. I went through the same thing with it. It's like, when people would mention the Iowa Writers Workshop, I didn't know what they were talking about, like in the 70s, because had never had any idea of ever going to Iowa, for any reason whatsoever. I'm going to begin with a short poem. Things are so bad, I have to read something affirmative right now. So this is a poem of affirmation, although I think almost all poems are that are well written. Mysteries encounter mysteries. What do I believe in? I believe in mysteries. They live in their own film of appearance. The seeds and branches, the twilight, the mysteries of the drunken face, whatever or nothing to be drunk on. And the olives darkening, all olives, any stage. And the heaviness of the embarking leaf, the horn of wheat, and the dripping plum, and the child fallen asleep, and the sling of corduroy close to her breasts. Mysteries attach themselves, the exact ones at this hour the small seabirds sing about, the ones content to eat from the debris along the shore. So, when I was around 19 or so, I was deeply into D.H. Lawrence, like I think a lot of guys might have been, to the despair of many of the women of our generation, for whatever reason. But I always say that it's important to look at anti-feminism too, and to see where the flaws are in the character of the writer or the characters in the books. But anyways, along with Miller and different other writers, I think I was involved with Lawrence because of his exploration of the erotic life. Miller was doing something that was crude and probably more natural, to experience in some way on an honest level, on a crude level. But I liked Lawrence because of his sense of the sacrament of the relationship too, as I started to mature more. But then I kind of got worn out from Lawrence because he seemed to be a little bit too idealistic about things. He didn't get into the shadows of it enough. So I was in Taos at his at the place where he lived, where he had the beautiful tombstone of the Phoenix there. And there was a little office where you could see Lawrence's paintings. Not many people know that Lawrence was also a painter. He was a pretty good painter too, a naturalist, not a surrealist or Dadaist at all. And for about $1 or $2 or $3, I don't remember what, it was an extra fee. They'd pull these paintings out of a closet and out of a drawer, and you got to get a look at them. And I was very taken by his painting called The Couple. Lawrence's painting, The Couple. In Lawrence's painting, you see a notation of errors absorbed in marriage lasting over 15 years in the facial content. The couple appear as they would appear after making love, aware of the wild birds that begin before they awake or drop into dimness out of waking, the merged couple. Endurance expands passion. Lawrence remarked, "It'll be better to be dead than to see it," the insanity of overall obedience to the wishes of institutions, banks, oligarchs, commissars, monarchies, the military. The wage ghosts and the owners with their empty tits multiply. The mercenaries and the military contractors and the investors that make them possible multiply. In the London police station cellar, the British cops and the official morality freaks burned all of the erotic and not so erotic couples in Lawrence's books. And the couple, for some, was always the spontaneous solution, the remarkable occasion for living in this world. Little manifesto without envy. I was reading the Diamond Sutra, on and off for years, and somehow I came back to it, written by Hui Neng. And it's kind of my play on how I deal with the philosophy of Buddhism. Without having to be known as the one who could steer through it, without having to become the connoisseur only of that, without having to stand by my unpredictable stabilities, and without having to stuff them under or choose one way or the other, without having to say the myth of it exploded, and without having to add the myth of it exploded itself a myth, and without the fractions of balance between the extremes, without blocking what the extremes erode into, without the essence of mind Mr. Huang Neng spoke of, and without the essence of mind he said was neither created nor can it be annihilated, without having to conclude, how can this be? And without having to add, how can it not be and still be thought, without being drawn to it or confounded by it, and without the name for the rarity of a certain depth it may or may not denote. Finally, without any of the high names of attainment, which all collapse into arrogance, that is to say, without abundance, without loss, without envy. So there are, I guess, for some families, a lot of obvious joys with children and raising them, et cetera, but there's also a great deal of fear in terms of the care and responsibility that can go along with taking care of kids. And this focuses on that non-sentimental aspect of the family called clinic. All I know is the one day I didn't walk my daughter into the dental clinic, I saw a van with out-of-state license plates pull from the alley, a van with curtained windows driving up to the side entrance. One time, and I see the cellar with bones and small skirts. Pulling away alone, I see Salvadoran skeletons from the news photo, mostly children's bones, piled in a ditch by mutilators trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. I see mockingbirds chewing black hair, and I see the squat oaf who dismembered a boy in a wooded golf course area north of here a month ago. I see the bailiffs, guards, lawyers, the judge, and the newspaper, television, entertainment goons trying to interview the mother whose pitiful body he pushed from and screamed and sang from like the rest. One time, and I can't distinguish whether a van is dropping off x-rays or cruising for a girl alone. To the point now, sometimes I can't distinguish when I hear certain cries in the other apartment or hotel room, whether it is people making love I hear above me or someone under someone back from cruising around in a curtained van someone saw pulling away. You know what I mean. So I'm going to use this poem as a prelude into this longer sequence. And the prelude poem here is called A Song I Know My Father By. And it's going to lead into this sequence, which is kind of, I call it a tribute. And it's really kind of a mixed bag tribute to my parents who both are gone now. This is a song to my father. I just got in a pretty good position and I was feeling good. And there was a guy walking around whistling. And it reminded me of my father, who was also an expert whistler, dirty storyteller, and all around a supportive, good guy, except for when he was pissed off at you, like most fathers. The idea of my father, 52, listening to Eric Burdon and the Animals version of The House of the Rising Sun, blaring out the digitalized Honda sunroof is absurd. The radio was never on in the car. My father was a whistler, Honeysuckle Rose, that Fats Waller song of the imagined, the improbable sweet flower. That was his melody. He almost always whistled it while he drove. I'm not saying he couldn't yell a child down to the cellophane girder of himself. I'm not denying that. The only person I ever heard call someone a jack-off. Ah, you jack-off. Get your hand out of your pants and drive. Turn already, for Christ's sakes. The same person, first thing, found my cousin Marvin, about an inch and a half away from being what used to be disdainfully, not even confidentially referred to as a complete dunce. The first cousin gathered up in his arms when the family came together to eat and knock political leaders while they played poker, telling their stories about pregnancy and debt, relating remedies to look less bald, announcing imperatives on that very day, where to find the oranges with the sweetest juice at the lowest price. Don't forget it. When there was a pile of money in the pot to make a winner, we used to kiss the folded down cards for them. My father, nodding to me, asked Marvin, "Kiss this card, Marvin. I'll give you $1." He, with that smile, 33 years later, turned into a perplexed grin. I think Fats Waller was into the deep of the flow. He made a fantasy about sweetness with his melody, Honeysuckle Rose. By that song, I knew when my father was on the pathway between box edges. 2 years after he worked himself dry in an airplane parts factory toward the end of the Korean War. The salesman back from a call, usually from the San Fernando Valley, middle of nowhere, whistling out there. The father home from work before the arm of great hair held me up to the face with short mustache bristles. I endured like anything unpleasant in love. Honeysuckle Rose. I don't know what I mean to say exactly about that song in relation to my father. The man just whistled it. Okay, I'm going to go into this sequence here. The first one is called Cake. those two always had that cheap cake. It was junk to me, not Russian bakery, honey cake, apple cake, rugelach, chocolate cream, poppy seed, synagogue, anything else cake. And they were protective to the point they'd blame the floor for wearing out your shoes. I never saw them express self-doubt. I know the expression. I knew them 59 years. The effect was incoercible. When they told you it would be there, it was there where they said it would be. Forgive me, you're worthless without dependability. But the cake, if you didn't eat the cake, they gave you a look like you were lost. Then another look to overlook what they expressed in the "you must be lost" look. I didn't know for 18 years the desertion that made them wild, shame to the point of resentment, plain and predominant. I'd come in, the cake was there on the table. Sometimes we had it out. The root of the arguing happened underneath whatever else was going on. A frustrated account, someone deserting someone, then the return. Cake became their habit. It had to have been agreed to with some forgiveness, to the expression of a plea with some begrudgment. It used to be one of those two cutting me a piece of cake, me resisting. I don't know what comes first, the lust for sugar or the bitter person. Hospital otherwise, too. My mother's name is Florence. I mention it because it comes up in the poem. His mother, last everything, second to last hospital, common to her ongoing commentary routine referred to the television glass, reminded him they always know what they're up to, even when later they say, I was depressed, I was drunk. It was a day I realized I didn't know what I was doing at any given time. I was a failure at my job. I felt obligated. I volunteered. What else could I do? I inhaled something toxic in the garage. It affected my coherency. It affected the control of my mouth and my lower body ligaments. I never wanted that job. They tricked me. I followed my attention deficit. I wasn't doing anything. I was whispering into someone's mouth. I had to do something. I was overwhelmed. I suffered testosterone, hair sweat, thyroid, imbalance disorder. What? You think I pull a list from my bra? They always know. And her, she absorbs everything. It's her boss, Karen, at Karen's Karen for Hair, beauty salon. She's blind, blames everybody, never looks at herself. Look at her. She's out of sorts over the condition of her toenails, like Aunt Ray. You never met her, treated me better than anyone. For her problems, she sentenced herself. Is it a contradiction? Nurse out there. End of commentary. She'll want to know the mood of Florence G. I'm all right, I'll tell her. She's going to ask the height of Florence G. 4 feet 11 inches. What do you know? Then she'll ask the weight of Florence G. And I'll lower my eyes from the screen. I'll look straight at you. Nurse, I'll say, darling, I'll tell you later. 3, him. He was in his overcoat. For him, the overcoat felt like an overcoat over an overcoat. He was in his unreasoning mind. 35 years he was administering their own medicine, untransformed transformation. They called it on the Gilligan Hour talk show. But for him, to do what? If he worked on his own teeth, he would still look like a silent film clown dressed as the front of a horse. If he worked on your teeth, you would go home without a mouth. He was where the juice was gone, none still to surge, his to manage. He demised the feelings. There were going to be sacrifices, indifferences resented, monotony of regrets, the kind of bird that would burst into the storm door or window type of unhandleable response. Who hasn't? Who wants it to be? Unmanageable constellations, stranded to manage, futile to hear or heard from, either incur. Entitlement demeans no response. Basbalov wrote of Hector to make of him Mr. Hector, the guardian of the perishable joys. To say that, she understood anticipatory regret. She understood missing in action and cradles, not only a cheek or earlobe the lips hold in the dark. To be near terminates, prescience terminates, unreconciled resentment adheres, people's sagas. It gets circular and circularier. He was spoken to in a hovel, an apartment in his mind. He slept on still. He would care to still. He interfered less. He had options he got used to, throwing them around. 4. Had the shower head gripped, protected in 2 suits. He was in the nature of 2s. Where is it written a man can't wear 2 suits? His father had him shaving his father at the end of his life. Who was King Alzheimer's to him? Several times annotated pouring water, pouring as metaphor, the finished, the consequence, the luckier duration, whether it is or isn't one, better off unwritten, uncalled in the nerves. Had the planter dish half full with water for warblers, vireos, the planter dish pool when they came onto the rail, titmice, juncos, watching them straw the water up with their beaks, heads up tilted, letting it spread into their bodies. Some took the water frantically, lifting it rhythmically with their wings over their faces. He waited. I'd wheel him out there to gaze at water touched by birds' faces, and the hummingbird arriving, the black one with white wings, feeding at the honeysuckle trellis where he used to sit. Then it flew back into me. 5. How could you know with all my millions, when I rented a Pontiac Bonneville, when I turned back, the brake pedal smoking, the ripped off feeling, the turning around fury, on the verge of losing the grounded feeling, the heavier part, the baggy version, in a gas station halfway from Decorah car rental agency, sweating over the brakes, vengeful about the prepaid amount. Did I have to remember the drawing? My might as well have been dead father drawing. What came to kill him already took his clothes, lost his shoes. His mind was bare, still had his slippers engaged. My cousin, the artist, made the drawing. There's a Jeep with a blown off door on the sand. Look at him. They've given the squid morphine drip. He's all salt flats in the flimsy ink bed. That's his left eye still closed, the one needing a padded middle clip on his glasses, 47 years to hold the eyelid up, broken from esoteric disease, broken in the Pacific part of the war. They were up on the computer screen, the mechanical maladies, Laird the mechanic, where they sent me by phone. You're useless looking at them, resentful enduring the iced overlook in the brake cylinder lining, the mechanism defecanism, a lifetime of hissing and firing on your own screen. Whoever sat on a bench outside a garage burned out behind his mechanism like that? Whoever the spies and riot police were at the time, same as this time. Whoever said disappointment is the lack of resolve, who wasn't petty. I don't even think it's an emotion. the entire appeal to incoherence in front of me, not a way of not talking about it, but not something else. There's no rescued effect. You look like one of those uptight mourners. At home, you roar. This exasperated candor, making all the sense I get. 6, and I'll close with this: print for layers. 2 pairs of socks, he wouldn't take off 4 pairs. To have absolute attachment, to cling to something, to hide stock market tips, to protect his allure, to regard behavior exclusively in even-numbered units, to be stylish and inflexible, to torment himself. Alone in nylon spandex, to erase feeling abbreviated, to forget his enlarged prostate, to bury his neuropathic arches and heels, to elude voluntary asphyxia, to date and marry with his pants off, to be a Greek poet with his marble nose broken off. He preferred the mid-calf, to feel elegant from the ankle inward and the ankle otherwise, to affirm repetition, to relieve the emotion of servitude, to submerge being designed for toe fungus, for nightmares, for dental devilry, to test anxiety through excess for the hell of it, to condone excess labor for the hell of it, to outsmart vacillation, to explore robot surrealism, to get over missing the feeling he once had Methuselah's genitals, pulled up each cuff, layers stretched tight, to stop seeing the street we lived on in 1968, to overcome the habit of deriding whoever cooked for him, to distract the attention of Dr. Bunthorne, to be a contraindication of metaphor, to resist holding my hand and then to hold it, to discourage the mosquito, to maneuver through shreds of impressions, 2, 4 pairs for the sake of one last lame-ass convicted endeavor, to ensure attraction, to explore the eros of socks only, to surreptitiously rub his own feet, to re-examine and re-experience hedonism, to test the results of his eye exam, to forget his own and the masses' poor-ass asses, to inform you a charge crouched over him. He'd roll them on to make clear anything outside the present tense dream is discouraged, to continue admiring the cotton polyester sweet and low blend, to think about the enigma after finishing a plum and how in the first place he found the plum, to block out hearing the surveiller voice in his world, to stop hearing the voice that taught him how to narrow his eyes, and to experience a rust brown Kaiser Manhattan car memory color with secure feet, because nothing was secure, standing at his drawer, leaving his drawer, or on his way back to the drawer, wrapping and quilting himself in stockings to stop his veteran's imagination recrimination, to thank us for everything and for putting him up for the night, to think to himself, they can kiss my shitter, to overcome tolerating evaporated volition and authority, to deface all inconvenience, to forget he will speak to the deaf from a Yarzite candle, to disregard how matters now rest, to dilute the feeling of being a skeletal wand. The dead have their underworld, you have yours. Nobody gives a damn what's not in theirs. Their taqueria hours in solitude timed out. The chronicle maniacal broken off. A not so contradicted place, and I excreting what it will not perform.
Thank you, Doren, for an outstanding reading.
Wow.
Your poetry has such great vitality. It's uplifting, erudite. You do personal work, and yet you transcend the personal. And the poem for your father was lovely. You mentioned earlier Henry Miller, and I always love Henry Miller for self-liberation. To me, he represents self-liberation. To me, he just decided to write and not work at that messenger service anymore and turn himself over to the creative. And both of you have tremendous energy in your poetry. And I had asked you the poems that I asked Charles when you read here before. So let's try a couple other questions. Since you're both teachers, and I'm talking to you, Doren, the first question is, what do you tell beginning poets about how to write poetry?
Well, I think I always tell them something different. Teaching creative writing is a I don't know. I always feel ambivalent about being a creative writing teacher, to tell you the truth, because I came so late to go into something like a workshop and things like that. I felt, along the lines of what you're saying about Henry Miller, that, it's up to you to really live out your life. Whatever your sexual destiny is going to be, however you make a living, how you deal with truly remembering and recounting what happened to you in your childhood. One of the things I tell my students is when I'm done with them, I tell them to get out of school and go hit the road. I tell them to go to Europe. I mean, I used to anyways. I don't know what it's like now, in terms of the pandemic. But I guess every creative writing teacher probably tells their students to really face the censor inside of themselves and to read as much as possible. I think one of the problems with teaching creative writing and all of the institutions that have been built on it is that it's destroyed poetry, I think, to a large degree. And I don't mean this from some arrogant or egotistical framework, by the way. I mean this out of compassion. I mean that I think that life experience is really where all art comes from. And I always remember, I was deeply into Van Gogh too, because I'm also an artist at the same time, in fact, earlier than D.H. Lawrence. And I know that when he was a little bit older, he went back to the academy to actually study drawing. I forget what the famous teacher's name was. And he drew this, they had a model up there, and he drew this voluptuous, exaggerated, like Venus of Willendorf type of body based on this naturalistic, impression that everyone else was doing. And the guy came up and insulted him over it. And he said, "Why did you draw that like that?" And he said, "You can only draw a woman's hips like this. They're made to deliver babies. This is the way a woman's lower body is. It's not this perfect, idyllic, like sculpture here." So I think that what I'm thinking maybe subconsciously here is that all young writers need to, study the forms and all that. I mean, I tried to write villanelles and sonnets, and I loved, of course, like especially Keats, and certainly Blake, especially Keats, though, because of his tenderness, and his mastery, of rhyme and meter, et cetera. But it's not the way we write, so I abandoned it very early. On the other hand, I teach them that there's so much to learn from this in terms of how to absorb ways to deal with sound, repetition, how to appreciate an image, etc. So I emphasize things like that. But basically, I try to teach them to do what you said about Henry Miller. Try to live a liberatory life. The books are there for you to read. You don't need me to teach you how to read. Go read. Go find how it is to not be able to sleep for 2 days and find a savior in a book and then start writing out of that. Go see what it's like to lose someone, like to suicide, and see what it's like to write about something like that. There's not much I can really tell students. I'm just very patient with them, when I work with them, and try to bring out, Socratically speaking, through a kind of a question and answer, what it is. It's really, as Charles said, beneath his humor, which is outstanding, that there are deep things going on there. Well, the same thing with the beginning students. They may be writing something that looks like a letter, but all of a sudden, as a teacher and as an older person, you can zero in on what's maybe going on in the subconscious of their actual writing. That they'll open up to that and write something about it, very hard to tell, usually not. And in that sense, there may be some truth to the fact that it is a calling. It's a very difficult destiny for most people. As we know, all the artists and poets that are dead commit suicide, flip out, it's the human condition is something you cannot teach. You have to experience it. And that's what all art and writing is about to me. So I try to impart that a little bit, and I get pretty far out with them when I start to ramble.
You're very smart, and I appreciate both of you. You're both such mature writers. And just one last question, if you could answer it briefly. If a student came to you, a young student, and was beginning to write poetry and asked you, what do I focus on? Where do I put my mind? Would you have an answer for that, or would you speak along the lines like you had just spoken?
The first thing I tell them is your hangups are your muse. I mean, really, your hangups are your muse. Your repressions are your muse. Your ecstasy is your muse. Your feelings are your muse. Don't repress them, whatever they are. If you have to smoke a joint or drink a half a bottle of scotch, to stick with it, do it. Do it while you're young, because you sure can't do it after when we're our age.
You haven't slowed down.
Oh my God. Someone gave me something to smoke a few weeks ago. I thought I'd never see the end of hell,
But what you mentioned earlier, and then I'll turn it over to Jennifer, is you mentioned word and music. And it, comes back to image and rhythm. And, God bless both of you. You're both superlative poets. And I've known you both, and it's been fabulous watching you both develop. You really have filled this little over an hour of our time, and you've really enlightened me and those listening what poetry is about and what good poetry is. So thank you very much. Here's Jennifer Clymer.
One thank you to you, Harry. You're
You're
a fine poet yourself, and you're a really gracious man. I just want to say that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, I agreed with everything you said about writing, Doren. That was great.
Oh, thanks, man. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. You had me choked up this hour.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And the vibrancy, but also the tension, because we all have different issues with our families and things that we come from, and the way that it was expressed today, had me right here.
Well, thank you.
Please come back soon. Don't let it be another 6 to 10 months, however long it's been. Because honestly, Doren, I feel like I can just walk around your place, because the way you have the framing, I want to know every single book. I want to go to the draft table. I love being in your space. Charles is a little more private about where he's at and what's going on in his life, but yours is just an open book. And I
give him time.
So let me also throw my thanks to Harry. Very delightful hour. Thank you, Harry. Harry, what's up for next week?
Next week we have two poets reading two great poets, two excellent poets reading two excellent poets. Mark Rhodes is going to read the poetry of Robinson Jeffers, and Steve Goldman is going to read the poetry of William Butler Yeats.
Wow, what a combo.
History. So I'm looking forward to that. And Thank you once again, Charles, Harper Webb, and Doren Robbins. And thank you, Jennifer, once again.
Okay,
pleasure.
thanks to everybody. It was a pleasure.